Hello and welcome to the next in the series of ICF Broadband Agendas webinars. This one focusing on the economic case for municipal broadband, because obviously that is a profound issue that every city or town or region needs to face as it begins to deal with how do we get the broadband capacity that we need in order to be competitive in the future. My name is Robert Bell. I am one of the co-founders of the Intelligent Community Forum, where my job is to look after our data and analytics, as well as to author most of the content that we actually put out in terms of books and reports and so forth. And more about that in just a moment. About the Intelligent Community Forum, in case you're not familiar with us, we are two things. We are a global network of cities, of metro areas, and counties that have been recognized as intelligent communities by us that collaborate on economic and social development. And we're also a think tank that studies those same intelligent communities and how they use information and communications technology to build economic prosperity, to solve social challenges, and to enrich their cultures, because those are the three factors that make the place called home the place that you most want to live, the place that people most want to found a business, and the place that businesses most want to succeed. We're best known for our Intelligent Community Awards program, which has been going on for 15 years. It's actually the public face of an ongoing research project into how communities succeed in the remarkable economy of the 21st century. And from that, we produce information on best practices, how to do this right, how to adapt to this fast-changing world. And we do it through our Community Accelerator Education program, which we bring direct to communities. We do it through publishing in books, reports throughout the year. We have helped found institutes for the study of the intelligent community, and their aim is to take our global insights and to apply them at local level and to help communities in their regions to adopt this methodology and to find economic and social and cultural success as a result. We put on every year a global summit, which attracts people from around the world who are all working on the same problems, have the same concerns, and come to learn from each other, as well as to do the good fundamental work of economic development with each other. And to pursue opportunities on many different fronts. And finally, we have in places where there tend to be many intelligent communities, we have established ICF national organizations that currently exist in Canada and in Taiwan, which both of which nations have a very high proportion of intelligent communities at this point. There are currently 170 cities, metro areas, and counties around the world that we have identified as intelligent communities. They're on 5 continents, and interestingly enough, they have populations ranging from 10,000 up to 12 million. We believe very strongly that size, while it does matter, is not the determining factor of success, that the small and mid-sized city or county has every possibility of advancing at the same rate that the best-known cities in the world do. And that's for a very straightforward reason, because we live in an age of intense digital disruption to our lives, to our work, to the companies that compete in our economy, to the way we worship, to the way we educate, to the way we do almost everything in our lives. And in that period of digital disruption, intelligent communities are the ones that take those same digital tools, the ones that are causing all the disruption, and turn them to their advantage and use them to build inclusive prosperity, to solve social problems, and to enrich their cultures. Not just to be smart cities, smart towns, but to actually use these tools to remake their economies. So today, our agenda is going to be to look at case studies of a couple of very interesting places, not large places, that have done the hard work of building out broadband networks. And they're going to tell us a bit about why, what was involved, and the challenges that they faced and the opportunities that they're able to seize. And one of those is in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, a beautiful little city home to the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, about 90 minutes outside of Toronto, maybe 2 hours actually outside of Toronto, depending on the traffic. And Hudson, Ohio, which is a small city in the Columbus metropolitan area. Again, a very interesting city trying to punch far above its weight using broadband and information technology. And finally, we'll hear an interesting presentation on the real economics of municipal broadband networks. They are not necessarily the things that you may be worrying about if you're busy building your own network. And that'll be quite something. And then we'll finish with some questions and answers. You will find that there is a question panel on your control panel. And if you open that up and put a question into there, I will get to see that, and I'll be able to bring that into the discussion at the end. And that's because all attendees, my apologies for that, are in listen-only mode so that we can proceed. Afterwards, the recording of the webinar will be available on ICF's website. And should you have any technical issues, there are a couple of telephone numbers, one toll-free in the US and the other available internationally, that you can use to inquire. To my knowledge, we've never had a technical support problem, but you never know. So you might want to jot those down. Okay, just before I introduce our first speaker, I want to just give you very briefly ICF's view of how broadband deployment tends to go. We've looked at a lot of communities over the past 15 years, and we find that their approach tends to fall into one of the 5 areas you see here. And these are arranged in order from least controversial, least challenging or disruptive, down to most controversial and most aggressive. The straightforward one, of course, is land use policy. No one would argue that a municipality or a county has the right to make rules about its land use. And those rules can be changed or updated to reflect the imperative to deploy broadband. So that may mean everything from mapping existing networks to find opportunities to either update regulations or to have discussions with private sector carriers about the places that they're not filling. It can mean improving the access policies you have for poles and conduit, including what you're charging for them. There's always a tension between charging money to support the general fund and encouraging the private sector to invest. It may mean installing conduit. Whenever you dig up the streets, why not put some conduit in there? You do that for enough years and you can build up quite a network. Or it may mean changing your building codes to require that new and renovated developments are broadband ready. Again, all within the purview traditionally associated with a municipality. Many places go a step further, which is to say, you know what, we're tired of paying our telephone carriers and our broadband carriers to provide service to our government. Why don't we capitalize our own network instead? In that case, they work with a systems integrator to do exactly that. And they're connecting their offices and their schools and their fire stations and their police stations and every other imaginable government network. And in most jurisdictions, it's completely non-controversial. It's fine for government to make that investment. And it tends to pay back very well in a matter of a very short number of years. You get that money back on the savings from not paying the private sector, and you begin reaping true savings in the cities or towns or counties budget. Many places go a step further, which is to turn that government network into public infrastructure. They install dark telecommunications assets, whether they're conduit networks, they're optical fiber, they're wireless towers, and they market that infrastructure to the private sector. So they get integrators to build, they get telecom carriers to use. Those buyers, those carriers install the equipment, activate the circuits, deliver the service. And on a financial basis, those lease payments flow to the city or the municipality. They help pay the capital costs and eventually produce perhaps a small income. But the point is that they have substantially reduced the risk that the private sector faces in coming into that marketplace, and that helps to encourage competition. Going a step further, a lot of places decide that dark communications assets are very useful, but they're even more useful if they're lit, as we say in the fiber optic business, if they're turned on. And so they go a step further and provide what's called the transport layer in their networks. And the whole purpose of that is simply to provide a common playing field for any competitor that wants to come in. And the impact of that can be substantial in terms of, again, reducing the risk of the private sector, changing the business calculation that allows a private company to look at that and say, wow, given how low the risks are now, I can afford to invest in this and see how it's going to work. And finally, direct competition. Communities do many things to try to attract the private sector, and there are just some places, some circumstances, some private sector operators who just will not invest no matter what they do. And that's, of course, their privilege, but it is also the privilege in those cases of municipality or the regional organization to say, fine, we're going to set up our own communications carrier. We're going to deliver telephone, and we're going to deliver broadband, and we're going to deliver television if we can, because it's a good moneymaker. So in many cases, they take advantage of municipally owned utilities to do that because they're already connected to every premise in the area. The goal is never to be a telephone company. No city or county wants to do that. The goal is to contribute to economic growth and a better quality of life for residents, businesses, and institutions. So 5 different approaches, all of them valid, all based upon what's going on in that community at that time. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce a friend and colleague, Yasny Semsadini. He is the CEO of Festival Hydro, a great name for a utility company, and Rhizome Networks. Now, Festival Hydro is a local electric distribution company that is owned by the city of Stratford in Ontario, Canada. Has about 20,000 customers in that municipality and surrounding ones. Rhizome Networks is the city of Stratford's owned internet service provider, which has dark fiber, lit fiber, and a ubiquitous Wi-Fi network across the city. Now, Stratford has been a top 7 intelligent community several times over the past years, and Yasny is here to talk with us about how this innovative community approaches development of a municipal broadband network. So Yasny, are you with us, sir?
Yes, hello, good morning, Robert, how are you?
Good morning, over to you.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
We can.
Perfect. All right, I will just put my screen up here. So I think everyone is seeing what I'm seeing now, which is our Festival Hydro splash page. Is that correct?
You are online, my friend.
All right. Well, Robert, thanks for the introduction. We're very happy to be here to talk about Stratford's story a little bit. I know this whole piece of broadband and how you get there in a business case way is a question that comes up to the city of Stratford a lot of times. And our story really starts at the electric utility. So Festival Hydro, which Robert mentioned, services 20,000 customers in the cities of Stratford, Brussels, Dashwood, Hensel, St. Mary's, Seaforth, and Zurich, is wholly owned by the city of Stratford. So this company has been around for about 115 years, and in the year 2000, the government went under what they call deregulation, and what we like to call is re-regulation of our industry. And at that time, what were called PUCs were then actually given to the cities to own and manage those companies. So that story really spawned where Festival Hydro started today, and also where Rhizome Network started. But for us, what I think makes, of course, an intelligent city is cities that have A, infrastructure, and B, have innovation. So I think it's those 2 pieces that really push the intelligent community vision. And I think those were things that were happening in Stratford in spades. So Festival Hydro, as I had mentioned, really looked at innovation within a company that most people would think of as being really not innovative. Utilities looked very similar to what they did 115, 130 years ago. So the question was, what were we doing differently? And for us, it was about investment. So as you can see on this slide here, we're looking at innovation in a number of ways. One is in 2013, we actually built our own transformer station. There's not a lot of smaller utilities like ours that own their own transformer station assets. This was a $15 million investment in the city of Stratford. And basically it steps down power from transmission level 230 kV to distribution level 27.6. Now, why it's important for us to own this, you will see in the next slide in terms of what other assets we can bring to our grid. When somebody else owns the transmission station, such as the transmission company, Hydro One in this case, you're really stuck to what they want to do with those assets, and you don't have the ability to move things forward yourself. So more about the transmission station will come. Self-healing grids. So another investment that we made within our service territory was actually to install electronics that if there's an outage in our system, electronics realize where the outages happened, and we can actually automatically switch breaker positions to bring up more of the power quickly. So now, instead of having a situation where there was a power outage and we have to roll a vehicle, let's say it's after hours, takes a guy half an hour to get into work, takes them, another half an hour to find out where the problem is and then to start correcting it. The self-healing grid gets a step closer and actually brings the power to more areas within a minute. So that way, instead of an outage affecting 1,500 customers, maybe it's only affecting 300. So we can bring those customers back up, meaning that our reliability is improved. Next, we're actually the smallest utility in Ontario to be green button compliant. So green button is the standard that is used in customer data. And what it allows us to do is actually provide customer data in a, I guess, not a unique way, but a very specific way, so that third-party app developers can actually design apps to use customer data so people can use electricity more intelligently. So by having this standard protocol in customer data, now you can get a whole bunch of third-party apps that will give you, for example, a warning when you've used electricity that you've set your threshold to. If you're using too much in a day, if electricity is on at hours that you're not expecting it to be on. And really what happens is that data is interfaced with our smart meter data. So in 2010, the Ontario government actually made companies like ours put in a full smart meter network, which, and you'll hear more about the story on the Rhizome broadband piece, because this was really an enabling element for us to bring broadband to our city. So I'll talk about that a little bit more on the Rhizome side. The other innovation piece that this has really led to for us is what I'm showing here, which is battery storage. So Stratford is now the home of Canada's largest battery storage installation. It's 9 megawatts, 40 megawatt hour installation. This is probably one of the top 10 largest battery installations in the world. The reason that Stratford was selected to house this was because we owned our own transformer station. So we could actually interface the batteries directly into breaker positions at our station. And the other piece is this innovation that we have as a city and as city-owned companies allows us to move much more quickly than other companies. So we actually signed the contracts on doing this project in August of 2017. The station is now built. They're in final testing, so we're actually connected to the grid. They're cycling up the batteries and doing final testing within this battery storage facility. And all this, again, is that innovative thought process that the city of Stratford has had and applies to its infrastructure companies. So now that brings me kind of the point of our discussion, which is Rhizome Networks. And the reason I said the story started with the utility is that in 2000, when deregulation, re-regulation happened, we actually had fiber assets within our electric utility. So that slide that Robert showed you, that showed people, moving down the spectrum from just setting policy to being direct competition, we actually went through all those stages in our 18-year lifespan of Rhizome Network. So between the year 2000 and 2010, we simply had a dark fiber network around the city of Stratford. Initially, that came out of our utility, and we had that fiber for our own use. We'd run it between stations, between reclosers in our head office. So we were just putting fiber out into the community. And as we would pass a location, we might get a manufacturing facility ask us, hey, I see you guys are putting up fiber. We need a fiber strand between our location here and our secondary plant on the other side of town. Can we use the fiber you're putting up? So we were actually just a dark fiber organic growth model for about 10 years. And then smart meters came, and that was our enabler. So in 2010, as I had mentioned, the government said, hey, utilities, you now all have to put in smart meters in your distribution system. And what that meant is we needed to start backhauling smart meter data so that we could start billing customers. So what was unique about the city of Stratford is we actually took that opportunity to backhaul our smart meter data over Wi-Fi. So where every other utility in the province simply got a proprietary backhaul system that only backhauls smart meter data, and literally they're hour readings, so 24 readings in a day, 720 readings a month per meter, we decided that, hey, that's not a lot of bandwidth, so let's backhaul that information over Wi-Fi. And then we have a secondary benefit, which is actually providing Wi-Fi service around the city. So we moved from being a fully dark fiber company to then lighting that fiber, so becoming a competitive ISP and also providing Wi-Fi service. And that happened in 2010. We were initially doing this as an open access network. And what we found in open access was none of the competitors wanted to go onto our system. This is a common story you'll hear. So, in our neck of the woods, you have the Rogers and Bells and other smaller independent telcos, but they all want to use their own infrastructure. They don't want to use the city's infrastructure. So we decided that we would compete against them directly. And what that allowed us to do was gain some people's some people's ear and some people's vision of, okay, well, if the city of Stratford is taking our business away, how can we now partner with them? So we actually got people who came onto our system after we started competing. That almost created a situation where, hey, if they could use our infrastructure to get to an end customer, then they knew we weren't competing against them to try to take that customer. So it almost formed a cooperative relationship. And in 2012, we actually formed a partnership with Whiteman Telecom, which is an independent telecom company here in the area that services about 20,000 people, to pick up commercial customers. So what they would do is they would actually find and sign up the customer. We would connect the customer, so we would own the infrastructure, they would own the customer, and we would do a revenue split based on that partnership. And what was good about it is being city owned, what you'll find is we very much will lower our upside potential to mitigate downside risk. So for us, it's about steady cash flows for long periods of time, and the other companies we're partnering with who are telecom companies are their risk profile is more aligned to taking the risk of not knowing how many customers are going to pick up. So the partnership for us made a lot of sense and allowed us to expand our lit service to more commercial customers. What that partnership also led to was we are now signed up with Whiteman to bring fiber to the home to Stratford. So we will be connecting all 11,000 residential customers in the city of Stratford to fiber. And again, we do this in a partnership model in which the city of Stratford owns kind of a ring bus, a 15-kilometer ring bus around the city, and Whiteman then connects into that ring bus into their POP locations and feeds fiber to the home. So they own the customer, but now the city will get residual dollars on every customer that's picked up. So we've now mitigated, again, the downside risk. We don't have as much upside potential, but we have a steady stream of cash flow coming in to allow us to build more fiber infrastructure. So these were some of the things that we've been working on. So I've talked about fiber to the home, Wi-Fi service. So again, with the smart meter builds that we've done, we can now actually provide ISP service to the home. We also have a free zone in the downtown that anyone can come onto, and they'll actually watch a video either on electrical safety or on energy conservation. So they watch a minute video. After that video, they get access to the internet. So what this has helped is actually allowed the city of Stratford to give access to more people to use the internet, both because it's cheaper at the home, so we give a $30 service. People can buy a day of service, a week of service, a month of service. So I think it's really helped lower income people be able to connect to the internet, which nowadays they talk about broadband really being an essential human service. So we see our investment in Wi-Fi and really helping the least fortunate in our society. I've talked to you about fiber to the home. The other thing that this has allowed us to do is we've now been named as the Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network, so AVIN, test site for autonomous and connected vehicles in Ontario. So over the next 4 years, they'll be bringing about 20 autonomous vehicles onto the streets of Stratford, and we will be using our broadband technology as a way to interconnect. So everyone thinks autonomous vehicles don't connect with other cars or infrastructure, but realistically, autonomous vehicles are actually connected vehicles, and they need to update information on mapping. They need to talk to street light and traffic light intersections to find out what color the light is when it's going to change. So we're actually going to be using our technology to interface these cars over the next 5 years. And all of that was because of our investment in broadband. And what we really found was that the business case isn't one business case. It's being able to layer 4 or 5 things. So, Festival Hydro, backhaul of smart meters, downtown free zone that that the utility pays us to show that their videos, joining with companies like Whiteman picking up commercial and now fiber to the home, and then also being a test center for things like autonomous vehicles. So that's kind of, an overview of the city of Stratford. I don't really want to take up too much time. I don't know if I'm over my time now, but I think it's really important for more the question period after of people understanding how we kind of went through all these steps and ensured we did it without creating a huge debt to our citizens, where we're private companies and we didn't actually take any money from the city to be able to build out this network.
Well, thank you very much, Yasnia. A quick dance around a very large topic. I've got a bunch of questions, and I hope we'll have time for them at the end. But in the meantime, we're going to push on. It's my pleasure next to introduce a couple of gentlemen who are coming to us from Hudson, Ohio. which became a Smart 21 community this year for the first time. Paul Liedman currently serves as the City of Hudson's first Chief Innovation Officer, Director of Information Technology, and he's responsible for, of course, network operations, GIS systems, digital, and he's also been deeply involved in bringing municipal broadband services to the businesses of Hudson, and he serves on their city's Velocity Broadband program. With him is Jim Stifler, a 25-year resident of the beautiful city of Hudson, and currently is doing his encore performance as the city's chief economic officer after 33 years as a Wall Street executive. So he works, of course, on business attraction and retention, on strategic oversight of its rapidly growing fiber optic broadband business. And he says his most gratifying work actually is working with his colleagues there on leading the charge to become an intelligent community. So, gentlemen, are you with us?
We are.
Excellent.
Thank you, Robert. Can everyone hear us?
We can hear you, and I think it's
okay.
We'll switch your presentation on in just a moment.
Okay, I think we're good. Can we see the screen?
I'm not seeing it yet. Just stand by.
Sorry, it looks like we are good.
Okay. We're good to go?
Yep, you can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and congratulations, Yasny. Yasny, we heard a lot of parallels in your story, but we also heard a lot of great ideas, and we're sitting here talking about how soon we can drive up and see you, so beware. So welcome to Hudson, Ohio. Yeah, we are a New England offshoot that dates to 1799, so 220 years, similar in size maybe to Stratford in population. Primarily known for our history, our charm, and our great schools. You see the city budget there. If that's relevant to anybody, the difference between the general fund and the total budget is that we make our own water and we have our own electric company. For several years now, we've been growing our commercial tax base. We've got a pro-growth council, a very progressive city manager, and a strong land development code, which allows us to grow out at the edge of our community, the edges of our community. And as Robert said, I'm intrigued and anxious to apply my business background, and Paul is my alter ego here as our innovator. So we're having a great time. I love to tell people I don't have a job, I have a jobbie. So a little background. In early 2015, before I got here, we had a weakening business proposition. The economy was improving. It was coming after the long, quiet spell that followed 2008, 2009. But our proposition was weakening a little bit. You know, we're a valuable and somewhat high tax community. Our taxes here, property taxes, are about 33% higher on average than any of our abutting neighbors. And the kinds of businesses that wanted to be here were corporate headquarters, professional service, technology, medical device companies, innovators, cybersecurity, that sort of thing. In other words, folks that were internet dependent. We had two incumbents, both of them telecoms or traditional cable, and neither one of them was meeting the needs of these industry sectors. So if you combine a weak equation in that area with high taxes, you know, we weren't necessarily validating the cost of being here. You know, our town doesn't really have warehouses, and we've only got a couple of manufacturers. So in September 2016, we created Velocity Broadband. It was built, it is owned, and it is operated by the City of Hudson. You know, we took all the risk here. We are the internet service provider. We did offer the two incumbents an opportunity to partner, and they both declined. So we financed this with an interest-only loan from our general fund. Fortunately, we were in a position to do that, and we built it with Hudson Public Power, our own electric company, and then some contractors. So if you fast forward to today, there's 60 plus miles of 10 gigabit fiber. You see the map there in the picture. The orange area is our primary business areas. The one in the center is our downtown. And right now we have about 170 users of internet and phone services. And we're just starting to make a true outbound sales effort. These were early adopters, and walk-ups. The other thing that is happening is you can see we left at the margin of the 25 square mile community there a little bit of an indication of communities to our west and to our south. We're in active discussions with both of them now about sharing this across our borders. Again, our business profile is somewhat unique. If we can shore up their businesses and make them stickier, we believe in a strong regional economy. And at this point right now, we're operationally profitable. We've got some other initiatives going in the city this year. We're going to issue a bond. We're a AAA city. And we're going to issue a bond and roll the capital expenditure to build the system, which is about $3.4 million into a bond issue here this year. So if you want to look at pure economic development, you can look at the next slide. It's just one of those little orange spots on the map. It's at the western side of the square city limits, and it's got the east-west road going right through it. It's Hudson Crossing Office Park. This is the most expensive industrial land in Summit County. It's very well located. There's a north-south highway there, Route 8, and it's right at the Ohio Turnpike. This park came online in 2006. We all know what happened in 2008 and 2009. It sat there. Between the cost of the land and the economy, it sat there. In 2012, a very successful local business that had a CEO who lived in our community, carved out a business and sold the prior business, and he established the first beachhead on this property at the back of the cul-de-sac there. But then we went to 2017 before we saw any other activity. That coincided with the arrival on a grand scale of fiber to the business community in Hudson. And in 2017, 4 buildings went up. 2018 right now, I look forward to adding 3 more and really taking this park down to 1 building. So the net investment on just this single industrial park street here will be, by the end of this year, I believe, close to $100 million in buildings and payrolls, and 1,000 jobs will be on this street. If you look at our city as a whole, in terms of economic growth in 17, 1,085 jobs were added in Hudson or promised, both by businesses on this street and significant other businesses in town. And the key thing to note is our estimation was just shy of 2/3 of them were technology jobs. So again, internet and fiber dependent. If you look at the softer impact, the next slide, Robert was kind. He said we're punching above our weight. That's our goal. We learned that term from Dublin, Ohio, in the center of the state, who has certainly done a great job of bringing intelligent ideas to everyone here. And this has kept us relevant. It makes us top of mind. We're a small community. People used to think, hey, you sleep here, you send your kids to school here. Well, now they know it's a place to do business, and it's a good place. It's well located. And if you're the right kind of business and can absorb the tax structure here, you get fiber as a bonus. So since we've done this, 2017, Paul and I hosted visits from almost 24 of the leading technology companies in the world. They've literally beaten a path to our door here. And that's because they tell us they see us as a petri dish. We're Midwestern, we're 22,000 people, we're not a giant city, and we own and operate all of this stuff ourselves. So they don't see a phalanx of corporate lawyers surrounding this opportunity to test and collaborate and grow. So you see some of the names there. We could have put a dozen more. The universities have come to the party, the Turnpike, the Department of Transportation, the state's chief information officer. It's all been good. And I tell you, my vocabulary in particular has expanded at an exponential rate in the last couple of years. So in short, we've changed the narrative. We're getting notoriety that money can't buy. And, we were very gratified to receive noticed that we were the only American city in the Smart 21 on October 27th. So it's changed our outlook 180 degrees. Being intelligent is a journey. It's not a destination. It's invigorated us. It's empowered us. I think in terms of what's next, the biggest issue on the docket in our town right now is similar to what Yasny talked about. We want to take this community-wide. When our city council authorized the creation of Velocity Broadband, it was about taking corporate computers and making them go faster. In just 3 short years, it's about becoming a connected community. It's about the Internet of Things. We're looking at great first use cases here: municipal safety, lighting. We've got a lighting pilot going now, traffic parking. We're going to switch out all of our meters. We've identified an autonomous roadway and an innovation district, and our new city hall is going to have a data center in it. Our corporate leaders that live here are many, and they've challenged us to refine our sandbox. What do you have that'll support businesses? How can you invest in them? What can you do for entrepreneurs? Why do people want to grow, live, and collaborate here? So we look forward to continuing to learn from the ICF. We'll be in London this summer. We trek back and forth to Dublin regularly, and we're just excited about this chance to future-proof our city, whether it's things we can do for the community, whether it's 5G, whether it's staking out our own turf in a net neutrality game. It's all within our grasp now. Somebody said to me one day, the better a community feels about itself, the better it sells. And I have to tell you, Hudson started in a fortunate spot, but the way we feel about ourselves as a result of making this investment is, it's hard to quantify. There's no turning back. We're excited, and we look forward to continuing to learn from all of you. Thanks.
Well, thank you very, very much. People who are listening are no doubt hearing themes, similar themes between Hudson and Stratford, and we're going to be returning to that at the end of our discussion. But before we do, it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Curry. Now, Michael is not from a city. Instead, he is a person who studies these things. So his company, Strategic Networks Group, is recognized as a leader in the econometrics of digital infrastructure, which is a fancy way of saying, if you do decide to build it, will they come? What will you get out of it? And what are your risks, and what are your upsides from the kind of investments that we've just heard about from Stratford and from Hudson? So, Michael, without further ado, looking forward to having you share some insights into the real economics of municipal broadband. And I know from chatting with you that there are probably some surprises there.
Yes, actually, thanks, Robert. And we have some interesting news stories to share today. I'm just going to maximize my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
We can, thank you.
All right, just got that. So I think, Robert, you laid out a good, overview of what's been happening, and we have some great examples from Stratford and from Hudson. I want to sort of take that. And take a word from Robert's presentation about quantifying this. We want to quantify, what those benefits are, because there's what I call, the supply side of broadband, getting the access out there, and then there's the demand side, who's using it and why and how are they benefiting. And that really is the challenge, because it's really twofold. One, to get your, commissioners, your councilors, your board members of the municipal government, the county government, or the utility, all understanding the importance and value of this. We're working with a county in Colorado that's just under 5,000 people, and they want better broadband, and they're trying to get that to work, and they're having to use wireless because it's such a big area. But of the 3 commissioners, one was on side, one was on the fence, and one was against. And how do you address that challenge to move forward, because this is needed for those who understand it. And then the second question is, how do you actually, move forward on this? How do you finance this? So I wanted to, address this, and I think, from my days with Industry Canada in 1995 when I started until 98 when I founded Strategic Networks Group, even then people understood the importance of broadband and all those online applications. the question was, to me, how do we pay for this? How do we ensure that we have affordable, ubiquitous access? And that's the real challenge when you have areas that don't make a business case for those private sector carriers, as you touched on, Robert. So just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, I think most of us on this presentation are, but I think it's for those who you have to talk to, that you have to make the case sometimes of, without broadband, how can your community improve local business competitiveness, innovation, and growth? You know, it's about relevance, you know, being found these days, not just competitiveness. You know, providing access to those essential services in your municipality, in your county, in your region, and frankly, survive. So if you don't have the like I said, the affordable, ubiquitous access that people want and need, it's going to be a real challenge. And that's a real significant pivot point that people need to, you know, get to, because broadband is essential to quality local jobs, the fiscal revenues, and the community sustainability. However, these are not on the business case, on the balance sheet of private sector providers, and that's the challenge. So I'll get into some of those benefits right now. You know, from the work that we've done, we've collected data from across 9 statewide data collections. We work across North America. From that work, especially with businesses, those businesses that are online, are using online applications effectively, what we call utilization. Those are the highest score from 9 to 10 on our digital economy index. They're seeing you know, 52% of the revenues from online activities. Those who are not online, either because they don't understand it or they can't get access, you know, that's just under 30%. So essentially, those businesses who are effectively, you know, having broadband, effectively using it, they're eating up the market share. And that's something to keep in mind for your community region. Hey, how can our business be competitive and relevant? And in terms of jobs, again, a real significant finding over the last number of years. Those businesses that are online and effectively using it are creating almost twice as many jobs as those businesses who are at a lower level of a digital economy index score. So this information, we have a lot of data on our website, but this is for those, you know, mayors and councilors and commissioners and board members, really compelling information about, you know, we need this to keep our jobs, and especially if you want to grow any new ones. And so the benefits to the community and regions and economy and workforce, I think we all know this, but I think it needs to be reinforced for those people on the fence who are on the other side of the fence, which is we needed to enable businesses to be more competitive, to create demand for high-skilled workers, which adds to the fiscal revenues and actually grows the market for service providers. You know, and you know, we've got this from you know, as I said, a number of state clients and private sector clients and telecom and so forth. We work at a community, regional, and state and federal level as well, as well as internationally. But you know, the challenge that we want to overcome is that over the past number of years, over 90% of all planned broadband projects were never built. You know, this broadband feasibility approach of looking at what is left over from the incumbents, you know, where they don't see a business case and trying to repackage that, that's a real challenge. And it's also leaving people with more questions than answers. And, you know, we want to change that. And the challenge is in these areas where they're unserved or underserved, you know, people are not getting the broadband that they need and even want. When there's, you know, rural areas, you know, not the population density or tough topographical areas like in Colorado, where we're working. When the network revenues are outweighed by the network cost, there's not a business case. And the issue is, you know, to raise new taxes or new debt is really not an option, you know, for a lot of these communities. The constituents don't want this, especially those people who don't understand the value of this technology. And so how, you know, with communities and regions, how do we get them prepared to meet those 2020 infrastructure requirements, you know, the future? Well, first of all, this is a must-have. You know, we need to pivot from, you know, expecting the private sector to come in and serve us. If they can, fantastic. But where there isn't, you know, we need to address it, because how can we expect local businesses to remain competitive and relevant in a changing economy that's going online? You know, keeping those people and households from moving away, and, you know, enabling those infrastructure and services like essential services and smart community services, the upcoming 5G deployment. I think Yasni mentioned, you know, distributed power generation, smart grids, self-healing networks. All that is enabled by these grids and these broadband networks. And so, you know, to reinforce that point, and this is research that we uncovered last week in working for the Colorado client, nearly half of households will relocate if they don't get broadband. And what's really interesting is who's going to relocate. We know about younger people and expect higher income households, but what we didn't expect was that long-standing residents will move. And this risks community vitality and has a significant impact on the demographics of your area. What kind of community do you want to have in the future if you can't provide them the services and the access that they need and want? In terms of employment, this is also some new data that we've pulled out from our data set. As I said, we've collected data from over 75,000 businesses, organizations, and households across North America on how they're connected, using, and benefiting from that internet connection that they have. And for households, for people who have gained new employment, in this case, 34% of households had a new job in the last 2 years, 24 months. What was really interesting is that 73% of those were able to get a higher wage job because of their online application, because of their ability to do that on internet-enabled options, working online or accessing those jobs remotely and so forth. That's huge, especially for these rural areas where the commute is just becoming a problem, but people want to stay. So it really opens up options for those communities, those location neutral workers, is that people want to attract. I'm one of those. I can live anywhere. I just need a good internet connection and an airport nearby. In terms of teleworking, some key things to understand are 3 and 4 agree that teleworking has helped them achieve their goals. More than half. I'm sorry, my screen here is a bit covering the GoToMeeting screen is covering my slides here, but more than half wouldn't have their jobs if they couldn't telework, and if they didn't have the ability to telework, they'd have to move. So for this community in Colorado, for example, those are some pretty significant numbers. I think for any rural area or any community, because there are patches where there are unserved or unserved areas, even in urban areas. How do we ensure, as I said before, ubiquitous and affordable access? And so why broadband matters, I've hit this already, I'm going to hit it again, and we need to hit those leaders in the community so that they move forward on this. Is it improves competitiveness, innovation, and growth, leading to job creation. It's key to retaining those businesses and households, and enhances quality of life. You've heard some of the examples from Hudson and from Stratford today, and it enables those smart services. However, as I said, those benefits are not considered by ISPs and are outside of the business case. So how do we make something happen when we don't have the broadband we need? And that question starts off with, how do we finance this? And frankly, there's money that's in plain sight. It's hiding in plain sight. And I will go into the Ammon, Idaho example, to me, which is something that we worked on last year with Ammon, Idaho, and their technology director there. But it's really looking at, obviously the network revenues, and there's various models out there, that Robert described, whether you're going to compete or provide open access. But you've got municipal cost reductions. You're already paying telecom and internet fees, to those incumbent carriers and so forth, competitive carriers. What are those cost reductions if you capitalize it? The subscriber cost savings, the economic benefits. Hudson described some of those, and then the enhancement of those essential services or smart city services. Those, in the case of Ammon, outweighed the cost of the network and the community engagement that they had to go through. And I think we need to put this all into perspective, because, you need to have a third-party assessment to look at that, so that when you get challenged, you say, well, here are the numbers. This is how the benefits outweigh the costs, so that when it's comes up to public debate and discussion, you can stand the light of day. But I think, as I said before, just now, you need to put this in perspective. Roads were the infrastructure for the industrial economy, and it costs $2 to $10 million to build a mile of road. Broadband is the infrastructure digital economy, and it's about $100,000 to build a mile of fiber. And so these discussions that we're having for fiber and these networks, really in the context of the other infrastructure investments that are made in the community for roads, for utility, electrical and so forth, and water and sewer, it really pales in comparison. And it's really, how are we preparing our communities for the future? And so in the case of Ammon, what was really interesting about what they did was they built a new municipal building. They wanted to connect it, And they approached the two incumbent providers to say, how can we get a point-to-point connection to this municipal building to connect it to our network? The first one said, we're not going to do it. We don't do that. The second one said it's going to cost you $80,000 up front and $2,500 on an ongoing basis monthly. And they said, what happens if we capitalize it, as Robert pointed out in his overview? And so they built it. They got basically a backbone across those municipal anchor institutions and the water pumping station and so forth. Ammon's a community of 15,000 people in southern Idaho in the Rockies. And they got the infrastructure, the backbone there, which actually covered that 25-year investment they made of $1 million was actually paid off at $1.8 million in just the municipal cost reductions alone. What they then did, and this was unique, they created broadband improvement districts, and that's important because they had those local exchanges and so forth in the community. Residents and businesses that said we want better broadband, they said, okay, it's going to cost X to build to this neighborhood or to this area, and per property. In the case of Ammon, it was $3,000 per premise, which worked out to $17 a month over 20 years. They had a threshold. They said, if 60% of people sign up for this, we can build. They had 77% of people sign up for this. And the interesting thing was those who didn't want it, they weren't impacted with new taxes or debt. It's only the residents, the property owners that wanted it that paid for it. And instead of paying, $120 a month, they were then paying $70, and that's now reduced even more. They're actually getting, instead of 100 down, 3 up from the cable operator, they're now getting 50 symmetric for $9.99 a month, which is significant. And that also has then the for the household savings, $840 a year, and for the businesses we calculate the economic growth. So in this case, Ammon's investment more than paid off. And I think this approach, when you start looking at how budgets are already being allocated and reallocating them, really is something that communities can then start looking at to approach broadband as an infrastructure platform, and the economic case for that, because there's what I call the business case for broadband, which is the revenues have to exceed operating and capital expenditures, but the economic case are those community benefits that Hudson just described so nicely. So start with assessing broadband benefits and the economic feasibility. Do the benefits outweigh the costs? If yes, then your community leaders can build community support and grow political will, which is key. That process, political process, cannot be underestimated. It's ongoing. You have to be on top of it all the time to get those people on the fence, on side, and can try to convince those people on the other side of the fence about this. Find the funding that is hiding in plain sight, and accurately assess and drive demand. Because we're working with a community in Illinois. They have built a municipal network. 82% of their businesses are online, and 52% of their households are on that network. The challenge is their revenues are only covering 2/3 of their costs. And so they're trying to, instead of people just buying the base package, how do we help them understand those value-added services, higher bandwidth, all those online applications, they can effectively participate, which not only helps that business or that household, health services, education for businesses, accessing new markets, it then also grows the sustainability of that network and community overall benefits. And then, then you have a real case to self-finance broadband as an essential service. And so, let's implement, and we're ready to help. This is what we help communities do, and any questions, happy to answer them.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michael. That was a great wrap up for the two examples that we saw. You certainly hit the themes about the opportunities that local governments have that no private sector carrier can begin to have. So we have a few minutes left in which we can ask a couple of questions of this esteemed group. I'm going to ask one general question that comes from our audience, which I really liked. This audience member wants to drill a little bit more into the connection between owning a utility and its ability to help you leverage things as you roll out a broadband network. So it's true in both of the community examples we heard. Could you talk a little bit about why that was a valuable thing for you?
Yeah, I can start. This is Paul from the City of Hudson. Yeah, it was one of the critical ingredients that we had that enabled us to get the whole project going. We really couldn't have had the level of confidence that we had in initiating the whole program unless we had an electric utility. A lot of the access procedures, the equipment, everything that they had in place were very, very similar, and definitely enabled us to hit the ground running in terms of getting the project started. So.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yasmin, what about you? I presume it's a similar story.
Right. So from our side, kind of similar things to what Paul was just saying. It really was the enabler, because the assets that exist in the electric utility, so poles, conduit, locations that we can actually string fiber up, the expertise and the people to be able to put fiber up because they've dealt with fiber historically. And the other kind of biggest one is, if you think about it, if you were paying a third party to lay that fiber, that money, again, is going out of your community. Where the city owns both these companies, if I'm paying from the fiber side, the electric company, to put up my assets, well, that profitability is staying within the city. So you're kind of doing things at a cheaper cost than it may look like on paper, just because you're kind of paying yourself to do the work.
That is ingenious.
Yeah. Michael here, if I could just add something to the comments, because I think it's really important, having worked with a number of communities and counties across North America. But there's two things. Having that abundant access, I think, as Yasni just said, every time you want to add a new service or test a new service, whether it's, health or education access or, whatever, having to pay for that makes it sometimes prohibitive. Having your own abundant, network, you can test things, really become an innovative community and region. The other thing to keep in mind is, there are, those dark fiber arrangements that happen, and it's great if you can look, any solution that serves the community is important. But also keep in mind, there's a difference between have a lit fiber network, which is to the premise, and it's a lit fiber, which is a true open access network, versus, you signed a 15 or 20-year agreement with a private carrier. The reason that's important, and this is from a specific example, they wanted to do a health pilot, and this is on the East Coast of the US. And there's a doctor that's running the network, he's a council member, and wants to do a health pilot. And the dark fiber service provider that had the connection actually wouldn't connect that pilot because they were threatened by it. And it wasn't in their service agreement, so they didn't have to move forward with that. And that, to me, is that disconnect between the private sector business case and the economic case for the community.
And we've got time. One more question, unfortunately, is all we've got time for, but it's a question for all of you. Michael's presentation was all about risk reduction, or perhaps I should say, uncovering the fact that the risks are not as high as you think they are. And Yasni's comment about paying yourself to do the work is also a similar thing. For both Stratford and Hudson, what would you say were the factors that convinced the city and its constituents ultimately to take the risks that you took? And I guess let me ask Jim and Paul first, because you sort of casually said we decided to launch Velocity Broadband. Well, okay, I imagine there's a bit more than that going on.
Well, there was an outcry that was growing from some of these businesses, and I said Hudson is home to sort of next gen or forward leaning businesses, not really older school businesses, and they were saying, as Michael said, we're going to relocate if we don't get a better equation. And Hudson had a small amount of fiber in the ground going to its disparate city offices, and we said, hey, we can minimize the initial risk by building on that and trying to get to the business community. Having your own electric company, again, a risk. One of the telecom providers said, we'll jump in with you if you put $10 million down. Well, we spent $3.4 million to build 60 plus miles. So we were able to mitigate risk there. And then as we look at going to the community now, it's moved from keeping entities in town to building a connected community. What we're trying to convince them is the risk there is low too, because we're going to save 2/3 to 3/4 of our municipal lighting costs eventually. We're going to make ourselves one of the safest communities in Ohio. We're going to manage our city affairs, our traffic, parking, and everything else. This thing is going to start to pay us back in ways we cannot yet anticipate. And that's a big part of the argument. And that's even before you get to, basically future-proofing your town. So,
well, that's the case that Michael laid out so well. Exactly. That's very interesting. Yasny, how about yourself? I mean, Stratford over its long course has been through several different risk positions, but what do you think it was that kept moving forward?
So I think we were lucky in a way first that both companies are technically private companies. So all the infrastructure investment we make is actually through companies that are owned by the city of Stratford, but not funded by the city of Stratford. So I didn't have to go through convincing council or every citizen that it was a good idea. For me, it was about taking all these business cases to our board of directors, understanding the risk and being able to mitigate it. So if you look at our step process along the way, there was always something that allowed us to innovate. So in 2010, it was the smart meters. And like I said, everyone took a direction. They didn't have a vision of bringing broadband to their cities. We did. So we already knew what the kind of guaranteed anchor tenant revenue was going to be. So putting a little bit more of an investment, having a 5 or 6 year payback to put broadband across the whole city was a bit of a no-brainer. And then with our relationship with Whiteman, bringing fiber to the home, the math that was given was bang on. So $3,000 to $4,000 a home, 60% penetration, and you can get kind of a 7 to 10 year payback. Those are the numbers. So for us to make that investment, $45 million, we might not make, but partnering with Whiteman, we could make a much smaller investment, again, really reducing our downside risk and then also reducing our upside potential. But that's our sweet spot where we know what the revenues are coming in, we're making money, and we're bringing access to all our citizens. So to us, it was always taking advantage of the opportunities as they presented themselves.
Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, that is all we have time for. And if I can make my mouse reappear, I'm going to unfortunately have to close this. But before I do that, I want to thank all four of you. This was extremely informative. A great mix of some storytelling, but also some real great business specifics that help in decision-making advice that I think helps everyone step forward. So thank you all very, very much for that. The ICF does a lot of this kind of work. Among other things, we publish reports on the different aspects of what we call the ICF method, from building a knowledge workforce to building an innovation ecosystem. And just last week, we published a new report on No Neighbor Left Behind, which is about digital equality in the intelligent community. Very important topic. These are available free to the full members of the Intelligent Community Forum. Those are community members, as well as for sale at a modest price to the general public. Coming events, ICF is for the first time in its history going to hold its annual global summit outside of North America. We're going to London with the help of our friends and colleagues at NextGen on June 4 through 6, and we're looking forward to that very much. On June 6th, we will announce the Intelligent Community of the Year, which will be the closing chapter of this year's search. As I said, it's actually a research project underneath, but it's always exciting to go through the stages from our Smart 21 to our Top 7 and finally to the Intelligent Community of the Year. And finally, on June 18th, we're going to do something that we've never done before. We're going to publish one of those famous lists. This is going to be the list of the world's top 100 intelligent communities as measured by us through our process over from data from the last decade. And it's obviously everybody's very interested in being at the top of that list, but it's, I think, a very useful tool for communities to see where they play and to decide how they can take their next step forward. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Sorry we ran over a couple of minutes, but I think it was well worth the time. And I look forward to welcoming you to our next Broadband Agendas or Innovation Agendas or other webinar in our series. Thank you.